Have you guys thanked Trump today? Have you guys remembered to thank Donald Trump today? Have you guys remember to thank Donald Trump today? But we have something new to thank Donald Trump for, by the way, guys. We have something new. If you guys want something, if you're thinking of a new thing to throw a thank you out for him at your bed, you know, at the foot of your bed when you're on your knees, hands clasped together, and that is a 25% tariff on imported cars and car parts. Now, this 25% tariff and the tariff threats is not something that's come out of nowhere. This is something that's been talked about for quite a while. So this isn't like a huge shock to the system, but Trump has been flip-flopping on the idea of tariffs so much that it has created so much market uncertainty, and it has made it so people really didn't know if this was just something to just try to finagle slightly better terms, something he really believed in with this whole spiel about Patrick McKinley, like a previous, President McKinley, not Patrick McKinley, President McKinley, and his obsession with tariffs, which he eventually abandoned, by the way. He said that the era for tariffs had passed. I guess Trump read the first half of his biography and then forgot to read the second half of the man's biography. Anyway, he has put the 25% tariffs down on imported cars and car parts. Now, there was talks about tariffs on all sorts of countries, on China, on Canada, on Germany, for all sorts of stuff. Not even just talking about car parts, but agricultural goods and other goods as well, even across the board tariffs, which would have been devastating for the American economy. This seems to be the one that he's really pulled the trigger on. He's announced tariffs on Mexico before, he's announced tariffs on Canada before, but at the last second, he'd always swerve out of the way, as if he was playing a chicken on the road with you, seeing if him turning to you would make you, you know, veer off the road and just give him the whole highway to himself. But that hadn't really worked. And so now it seems that Trump has pulled the trigger on a 25% tariff. Now, who is this going to end up hitting? Well, it's going to end up hitting a few countries overseas and a country near to our seas. It's going to end up hitting the Germans. The Germans obviously are not very happy about this. The German auto manufacturing industry is already in a crisis. Right now, there is huge negotiations and huge political crises in the country as the automakers' unions, the unions for those who manufacture German cars, are currently fighting with the auto manufacturers, you know, the business itself, over possible layoffs due to a lack of sales and decrease in profits, which can be, you know, it could be pushed on a number of things, but certainly the rise of electric cars and Chinese dominance in the electric car market and German, let's just say a lack of adaptability in that way has contributed. There's other factors as well, and I am not a automotive economist, so I don't think I am the person you should go for on the specifics of that. But the point is that the German automotive industry right now is in a bad space, and it's a space that can't exactly be made up by the German domestic consumer on its own. And so having the United States come in and put a 25% tariff on imported German cars, which of course, you know, Germany has a lot of famous cars that Americans buy, and especially when it comes to certain luxury cars, and the loss of one of the biggest consumer markets of 330 million people. Of course, a smaller amount of car buyers, but people usually don't have just one car in their life. I mean, this is something that happens, you know, people wreck cars, destroy cars, they buy new cars, and a loss to that gigantic market. And Americans love cars. I mean, we love cars. Our nation is built around cars. Our highways are built around cars. Even our cities are still largely built around cars. More than many other European capitals, mind you. And I've seen quite a few to say that at this point. So losing that industry, that market, where are they going to make it up for? And mind you, the German economy is already in a tough spot right now. The German infrastructure's in a really bad spot. That's why the government has announced a $500 billion investment. And just to give you the scale of how big that is in infrastructure, this conservative government going in, the same CDU that was Merkel debt break CDU, the same debt break they just choked out in Parliament before the next Parliament gets sworn in. That CDU is going to invest $500 billion in comparison to the $480 billion they made up the entirety of the German budget last year. to just give you an idea of the state of German infrastructure. And again, the German economy has many problems. So throwing this at them when they're such a big auto manufacturer, when the the car making industry is already in a rough spot there, not good. Especially since Germany right now has to pick up defense spending, and they need to be able to find the space for increased defense spending and aid for Ukraine as the United States pulls back on its role as Ukraine's ally. So this is not good for Germany, to say the lightest. It's not only not good for Germany, it's also not good for Canada. And the reason why it's not good for Canada is not only because of Canadian car part, a lot of Canadian cars, all those famous Canadian car brands, which I guess, those don't really come to mind. The real industry for the American car making industry is going to be the import of Canadian car parts, because there are parts made in Canada because they have, the workers who have the expertise to make those parts, and then we import them into the United States, and then we include them in our manufacturing process. And the loss of those parts are not just going to affect the parts makers in Canada, which is going to affect the Canadian economy and those workers. It's also going to affect those who have to import the car parts. So it's going to impact the American car manufacturers who have to import those car parts. And then it's going to impact the American consumers, not only who just buy foreign cars overseas, but buy American cars that rely on foreign components. And to give you an idea of how much relies on foreign components, here are some popular cars and the components and percentage of it that is assembled in the United States, from the United States and Canada and outside of that. And if you look here, you see the US and Canada is its own model in this New York Times piece, in this blue. It's its own model because the American and Canadian car manufacturing industries are intertwined, where the Canadian car parts support our industry. So this means that for even these areas where the American car manufacturing is dominant, the Canadians have still ingrained themselves so much that it is going to impact car prices largely across the board. And this means the Honda Accord, Tesla Model Y, the Toyota Corolla, sorry, I'm not a big car person, Ford Escape, Chevrolet Blazer, the Volkswagen, the Nissan Sentra, the BMW 3 Series, BMW, very expensive car, of course, the Hyundai Elantra. Good luck. That's entirely manufactured in South Korea, another country that's going to be hard hit by these tariffs. And there's a lot of debate in South Korea whether or not they should really pull the trigger on responding hard, because, they manufacture a lot of cars. A lot of people are employed by that. And one of their biggest industries, their consumers, is the United States. So the loss of that for the Hyundai Elantra, but also a whole other series of Hyundai vehicles is going to be really bad for the South Korean manufacturing industry. And the same thing is true about the Toyota Corolla, which is manufactured in Japan. But even for these parts manufactured in the United States and Canada largely, it's still going to have a price impact. For those completely assembled outside of the United States, it's going to have an even bigger price impact. But I wanted you to notice something. You see how the Honda Accord and the Tesla Model Y have all this blue near the top, and you get lower and lower and lower, and you get to more and more Mexican car parts? You can see that the Tesla and the Honda Accord are going to probably be less generally affected. But let me even be blunt with you. You can still see that even the Tesla Model Y, even, Elon Musk, Tesla, is supposed to be, Donald Trump's buddy. He's supposed to be the all-American manufacturer. He still has a number of his car parts coming in from Canada and manufacturing being done in Mexico. So even Tesla is not going to be affected by this price hike. It might be affected less than those like, for example, the Volkswagen, but even they aren't going to be left unscathed. So these prices are going to go up. It's going to affect Germany. It's going to affect South Korea. It's going to affect Japan. It's going to affect Mexico, which manufactures a lot of cars, manufactures a lot of car parts. The Nissan Sentra, for example, is definitely going to be affected. And anybody who wants to buy any of these cars are going to either see a price hike, or they're just going to have to go without a new car for a bit. And you want to know what? The markets are betting that American consumers, American car consumers, are just going to go without cars. And the reason why is you can actually see that auto part retailers right now, like AutoZone and O'Reilly, their market share on the S&P 500 is actually going up. In fact, they're one of the biggest gainers today. Today, they've got some of the biggest gains for the auto parts retailers in the stock market. So it seems that investors are making the bet that instead of American consumers buying new cars, they're just going to go and get parts to go fix their old ones. I will also say that dealerships are probably going to do well, because dealerships actually, why you would think, oh, dealerships, that's going to be, they're going to be horribly affected. Most of their money comes on repairs. And I really don't think that those higher prices are going to be going to them. It's probably going to go to the automakers. Now, if the automakers cannot sell, give the cars to them and they can't sell them, then yeah, that's going to hurt some. But again, the majority of the cost is going to be borne by the automaker, not the dealers. And again, most of the money comes from repairs. Repairs are probably going to intensify during this period. I will say that the biggest losers, of course, if you want to buy a new car, is you. Sucks for you. If you're in the auto industry, this is something that could affect your job, not only when it comes to like sales, but also just the imports of the parts you need to manufacture the cars on the line. And so these companies are going to be thinking about cost cutting mechanisms, and that might mean the people who are on the line of manufacturing these cars. So auto car manufacturers, the people that Trump came out back in 2016, 2017, he told them he was going to defend their jobs and then failed to. He's failed them again. Suppliers are going to bear a lot of the cost. U.S. vehicle exporters are going to bear a lot of the cost. Axios published an article that gives you a little bit more details about that if you want more generalized specifics that is consumable for somebody who's not economic expert. But the point is, unless you're a car dealer or an auto parts retailer, you're probably not winning with these tariffs. And while I understand that there is an effort to try to bring over this foreign investment, I think right now there's so much market uncertainty due to the amount of Trump policy flip-flopping on this, and just how integrated the international car market is, that any enticement or bringing over a foreign investment to be manufactured here at home, it's gonna take time, and the American consumers are gonna feel the brunt of it in the meantime. And that doesn't even mean this is necessarily going to be that successful, or certainly be successful enough to make up for the increased costs or the disturbances to the auto manufacturing market inside the United States. Because if the purpose is to bring auto manufacturing to America, but then you make America a more difficult place to import car parts to, I understand that the American consuming market is valuable enough that some companies will go around that process, but that is going to mean increased price, and it is going to mean some people just not being willing to play ball. They're just not willing to put their money in a market that they don't know if the tariffs are going to be placed again, if the tariffs are not going to be placed again, if there's going to be reciprocal tariffs backward. Point is, a lot of market uncertainty is not good, and Trump is certainly the king of market uncertainty. I wanted to look a little bit at what the Canadian Prime Minister actually said in response to all these tariffs, because this is the big one. This is the first time Trump's actually pulled the trigger. So I have a segment here from CNN where he actually gives us thoughts for a little bit. Mark Carney is the new Canadian Prime Minister, and you better learn his name, because the Liberals have made an astonishing political recovery in Canada, overtaking the Canadian Conservatives, who were up in some polls by over 30 points, and most polls more around 25. They've actually gotten ahead now of the Conservatives by like 8 to 10 points. So there's a decent chance Mark Carney is going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada too. He's the one who replaced Justin Trudeau after his numbers hit the shitter.
Trump has just announced...
He's a banker, if you need to know anything about him.
...sweeping new tariff on cars.
This is very modest. And what we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff. Business is coming back to the United States so that they don't have to pay tariffs.
President Trump announced 25% tariffs against our auto industry. And this is a direct attack, to be clear, a direct attack on the very workers that I stood in front of. Unifor workers I stood in front of this morning at the Ambassador Bridge, a bridge that is a symbol and a reality up until now of the tight ties between our two countries, ties of kinship, ties of commerce, ties that are in the process of being broken. We will defend our workers. We'll defend our companies. We'll defend our country. And we'll defend it together. You know, this will hurt us. But through this period, by being together, we will emerge stronger. I think what's happened, and this was part of our discussion, over the course of the last several months, Canadian workers, Canadians as a whole across this country, have gotten over the shock of the betrayal and are learning the lessons. We have to look out for ourselves, and we have to look out for each other. It would be appropriate that the President and I speak, given the action that he's taken. I'm sure that will happen soon. I'm not going to give you a precise timing on that. In terms of options, which was the second part of Ms. Martin's question, even during a caretaker period of government, we have anticipated this possibility. We have put in place the mechanisms so that if it is appropriate for retaliatory tariffs, and there's many considerations to be taken in those regards, and I want to have the meeting of our cabinet, Canada-U.S. cabinet, other considerations. We need to see the details of the executive order.
Buyer beware.
Okay, so he does have a PhD in economics, and he was the governor of the bank in England. So when I said he was a banker, okay, he's a money man. Which I think, considering he replaced Justin Trudeau, I mean, this is certainly, out of all the times for him to have placed Justin Trudeau for this exact moment, it kind of makes sense. Either way, though, this type of language from Canada towards the United States, an attack against Canada, an attack, that's the way he's describing it. I don't know if we would have seen this type of language during the first term. In fact, I don't think we would have. They were a lot more mild in their critique, a lot more reserved in the way they spoke, try not to, bring Trump's ire. But we got to understand the political moment right now in Canada. The reason the Liberals even have a chance of holding on to power right now is because Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney started to show a bit of a backbone when talking to Donald Trump, starting to show, a certain of defense of Canadian interests. And the public saw that and they rewarded them for it. Now, people can try to say it was something else or actually, Dylan, that's reductive. No, that's basically the entirety of it. The entirety of it is that the Liberals were down 25 points if you're nice, and then an anti-American fervor took over Canada after Donald Trump talked about conquering it and making it the 51st state, referring to the prime minister of the country as the governor, and saying it's going to be, theirs one way or the other, talking about tariffing them and giving them like a worse economic deal, going back on the same NAFTA plus, calling it a crap deal, even though he was the one who negotiated it. All of this just poking and prodding at the Canadians. It had an effect. America is not the only country with national pride, and America is not the only country with economic interests. And while you could try to look at our allies as pushovers, if you make it politically rewarding in any democracy to go after the foreigner, if the foreigner is an American, to them, they're still a foreigner, especially if we're coming and we're talking about conquering them. And you might see it as a joke. And when I talk to Americans, they see it as a joke. Let me tell you, people in Greenland don't know how serious it is, so they can't treat it like a joke. The same thing is true for people in Panama. The same thing is true for people in Canada. For example, there are businesses. Let me just give you an example of how this is negatively affecting the perception of the United States. You can talk about polling, which has already clearly showed a pretty drastic shift. But let's talk about tourism. We're seeing places in New England and New Hampshire, East Coast places that used to be prime spots for Canadian tourism, definitely from places like Quebec. I know that as an East Coaster who has a little bit of family up there. These places are losing a lot of reservations as people are pulling out because they don't want to contribute to them. They don't want to come to America anymore. They don't feel like they want to economically contribute to a country that they think is a threat to theirs. They might see it as some political statement. And I remember that one Canadian billionaire, O'Leary, I believe his name is, the bald guy on Shark Tank whose whole thing is, look, I'm mean and rich, haha. Which, those are traits to be known for. Either way, He came over in a yacht, and there was a video of him just like cruising around that was posted on social media, and Canadians flipped out, man. They treated him like he was a traitor to Canada, like he betrayed them, and that by going to the United States, it was some sort of a stab in the back of his home nation. And of course, not all Canadians view that way. Some people can separate, the government from the land and the people. But I mean, when you come and you pay sales tax, where does that money go? Right? If you would ask a Ukrainian why they wouldn't want to pay a tax in Russia, I think they would be pretty clear why. And obviously we haven't gotten to that point. But when one nation talks about taking over another, that's the way they start thinking. The Alien Enemies Act, when it was first put in place, it was actually in 1798 due to us fearful of French encroachment in the United States, even though they had just helped us overthrow the British and kicked them out of the colonies and, established the United States of America. We were scared of them infiltrating. And they weren't gonna invade. We were just scared that they would pull us into their war. And so we passed the Alien Enemies Act, right? They weren't even talking about invading us, and that's the way we act. So you think we suggest or joke about, even for diplomatic reasons? We're still coercing them with military force, even if we do it in a jovial manner. That's how they still view it. We're threatening them. And so our view of our nation is going down the toilet. And it's going down the toilet in Canada. It's going down the toilet in Greenland. And let me give you just one example of how it's going down the toilet in such a manner that it's making diplomacy in and of itself difficult. J.D. Vance and his wife were supposed to go to Greenland, and they're still going to Greenland, but originally it was just to be his wife. It was just supposed to be his wife that was supposed to go to Greenland with his son, and they were going to go on like a sledding adventure at a sledding event in Greenland, like a dog sled race. And apparently they approached a dog sled race, and they were like, hey, can Ursula Vance and his son, and now even J.D. Vance announced online he's going to Greenland, so he can't back out of it now. Can we come to the dog sled race? And it became kind of clear that they weren't really going to make space for them. They said, look, we're not going to stop you from coming, but we're not going to make space for you. You would just have to be in the crowd like everybody else. So they were not going to give them special protection. And if J.D. Vance and Ursula Vance and their son are in the crowd at the dog sled race and anyone finds out, I would be of the belief that they'd probably not get a warm reception. I don't think they'd be like in too much physical danger, but I think they could have a pretty embarrassing diplomatic scuffle where the president and others are talking about, oh, there's people in Greenland who actually might be open to the idea of being part of America. And then you look over at the vice president and they're all saying, boo, and like throwing snowballs at them. The dogs are barking at them. As the sleds fly by, they like flip them off in their fluffy little hats and stuff. Like, it would not be, in my opinion, probably a diplomatic coup by the United States. So they decided against that, and they said, never mind. We're not doing the dog sled race. What we're gonna, okay, how about we have our staff go around and knock on homes of doors, talk to people, see if it's possible that we can get a local to host us in their home. So that, hey, you could see they're getting along with Greenlanders. And that'd be cool, and it would make it a lot easier. And so they went around and they started knocking on the different homes. And then they found nobody. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. Nobody wanted to host them. Nobody wanted to take them in. They couldn't find anybody to host them. And so after failing to get up the courage to go to the dog sled race where he was going to get booed, and then failing, and probably not being welcome there, then failing to find any Greenlander who was willing to host them, they eventually said, how about we just go to like one of our observatory posts in Greenland? Let's go to something owned by the government where they can't say no. That's what they ultimately decided on doing. I think that's going to be in the next few days that they're going to go to that observatory post. So they're going to look at the stars and nothing actually really in Greenland. They're visiting their own base, which again, they allow us to have there. So why do we need to conquer them? Hey, we want to come here to talk about security interests because you're not nice enough to us. Anyway, can you bring us to our base we have on your soil? Sure. Yeah, they're very mean to us, guys. We need to talk about conquering them and forcing our ways on them. It's like a child brings up to you as like a little love card. Like, you can put your observatory post here. Oh, that's great, Billy. That's what it feels like. Why? Well, my point is, like, these tariff impacts, these like diplomatic overtures of conquest, they have an impact, and we are ruining a reputation in these countries. And while you might think, like, in an instant, like, wait a second, the Canadians would not put a retaliatory tariff because they know that we have more economic weight in the trade relationship. Okay, yeah, that's one way to think about it. But you know what you could do? You could end up pissing off the public so much that they don't care. You know, after Pearl Harbor, any trade benefit we could have had with Canada, they did Pearl Harbor, with Japan, like, didn't matter. Once you pass or once you hit a certain point, the economic benefit, and it's pulled away because there's other things that they care about more. National sovereignty, liberty, the border and territory, mineral rights, certain principles and philosophies. And if you just pretend that all that really matters is we have bigger wallet, then they're going to treat you like a greedy bastard. And that's what the Canadians view the United States as right now. Greedy bastards who either want to take their land or give them bad deals when it comes to trade. And so therefore, the United States just thinks that they can run all of their affairs for them and that their identity and sovereignty and way of life doesn't matter. And that's the way we're talking about them, so that's the way they think we feel about them. Or at least our executive feels about them. And our executive is the one that primarily controls foreign policy. And our legislature certainly isn't going to enforce itself to stop it. Look at these titles. Vance's planned trip to Greenland is stoking Arctic anti-Americanism. The trip added fuel onto Greenlanders' outrage. We have always looked at America like the nice big brother to help you out, and now it's like the big brother bullying you, Anders Lorson, 41, the owner of a local water taxi company, told NBC News. Growing up, you see Hollywood movies, all the heroes, and then you feel backstabbed, and you feel like an ally that's just gone the other way around, and you're like, this can't be happening. This is not the America we knew. Both the length of the trip and itinerary have changed. Erin Tor Jermiason, a 35-year-old Inuit law student, said she preferred the new itinerary, the one where they don't get to see Vance. I didn't want to meet him, she said of J.D. Vance. Well, that's very simple and direct, isn't it? Lorison, 67, attended a demonstration against Trump, whose plan, he said, were not acceptable here in Greenland. Why do you want to buy a human, he added. We are not for sale. If you see us like... he said J.D. Vance would be welcome if he treated Greenlanders like humans, but if you see us like things without feelings, then you are not welcome here in Greenland. The anger nonetheless remains at President Donald Trump, who since his first term has repeatedly stated an interest in acquiring the Arctic island, 2/3 of which sits above the rapidly melting Arctic Circle. Trump repeated his threat to take over Greenland, which is technically part of North America, on Wednesday. We need Greenland for international safety and security, yada, 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 yada. It's a huge wake-up call for everyone in Greenland, said Olsen, whose centrist Nalk Party had called for a referendum on independence from Denmark and closer ties with the United States, including a potential free association agreement. She added that another country showing interest has made people think that they were most likely worth much more than they thought. However, she said, some people feared Greenland would simply be colonized by another country. We cannot avoid the United States, so we need to learn to dance with the United States. Right now, I feel like the U.S. is forcing us to dance together. Come, you are going to dance with me now. It would be so much nicer if you said, would you like to dance? Greenland said she started to take the first steps towards independence, so we need to figure out who we are going to dance with in the future. In my opinion, it's now that we have to start negotiations with other countries, not just the U.S. We should talk to Canada as well, and other countries in Europe as well. Look, we could have gotten more military bases in Greenland. We could have gotten a free trade association agreement. We could have gotten most what you would want from an ally that would support your national defense and economic interests. I think it's two things. Number one, and these are my two competing theories, and they might overlap. The first is, I think that Donald Trump understands that the Arctic, somebody has gotten into his head that the Arctic matters, which is true. With the continuation of global warming and the likely opening up of more passageways in the Arctic Circle, you could end up getting trade routes that are going to be more effective than previous trade routes by rates of like 30 to 40%, which could help with international markets, globalization, cutting prices of goods. I mean, you can make a lot of money. And not to mention, with the melting of the Arctic, there's questions about mineral rights and all other sorts of stuff. And they know that other countries, especially the Russians, are very interested in this region. And so I think that they want to get ahead of it. And I think that's definitely a clear interest. Another thing, I think, is Trump is kind of, I don't know if he's in a historical kick right now. And he's like, I don't know, he sat down and he started watching the History Channel. My dad gets on these kicks where he sits down and he watches the History Channel, and he'll call me, and we're talking, and he'll just start saying, like, fact this about the Egyptian pyramids, and like, I'm not bothered about it. I'm just, I hate that half of it's just ancient aliens, but I'm not too bothered by it. But I feel like he's on a kick, because he talks about, like, President McKinley and tariffs, and when we talk about Greenland and taking over Greenland, this is not a new American ambition. This was something that was around during World War I, and even something that FDR suggested around World War II. Yes, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And so there is some historical precedent for American interest in the island. It's just that preceding American presidents found it much easier to just go to the people who live there and work with the Danish, who, you know, also relied on our defense for their defense over there in Europe, and say something along the lines of, hey, do you want to work together? And they said, sure. And Donald Trump has decided that the way he wants to go about it is this is what you're going to do, and that's the end of that. And if you're part of the United States, you're part of the United States. And when you listen to him speak about the justifications for expanding territory, I remember him, there's reports of him discussing like the territorial borders that divide Canada and the United States, with some of the justification being like how pretty the borders would look if you changed it this way or that way. And it sounds like both not only this historical yearning, but also this yearning for, you know, a more aggressive, expansionist empire, a golden age, as Trump refers to it, if you will. Maybe he thinks America would look prettier if North America was, well, America. But I don't think these are realistic goals. I don't think he'll be able to get the American public on board unless he's able to basically extort these nations into doing it. And so maybe getting just really beneficial deals while extorting them is the next best thing. So even if he fails to achieve this, then maybe he can get much better terms, even if it damages the United States' reputation in the process and makes these countries think that maybe they need to go make sure that they're reliant on other countries as well when it comes to trade and defense, giving us a lot less leverage, I think, in the long run, in all of this charade and shenanigans. Oh, and I almost forgot, I think, a big reason as well. I think Trump also gets off to it. I think he likes being able to talk about, I think he likes putting on, you know, you ever see those videos where Kim Jong-un like brings up the like binoculars up and he's like, yes, that's the way this test is supposed to go. He doesn't know. I mean, he knows the missile go up, right? But he doesn't know. That's what I feel like Trump's doing. I feel like it's a type of LARP, and he does enjoy being able to talk this way to foreign leaders, be able to talk this way to foreign countries, and be able to kind of, I don't know, look at the world like somebody playing Hoi 4, you know, somebody playing Civ, some grand strategy game, if you will. What a headline, though. Vance's planned trip to Greenland stoking anti-Americanism.